Well, we are in a series. It's a brief series called Entangled, and it's all about relationships, how relationships change us and how they help us. And each week, it's really centered around one big piece of advice that we have for you when it comes to relationships. So these are true for marriage, these are true for friendships, these are true for family relationships, work relationships, and each week, it's one piece of advice. This week, the piece of advice is this: watch your mouth. In fact, why don't you turn to your neighbor and say that? Watch your mouth. Ooh, that feels good. God, it feels good. One thing that it means to be a pastor is to spend a lot of time working with people. And so we spend an incredible amount of time talking with people, and I would say a lot of it, the vast majority of the issues that we come into contact with as pastors stem from careless, reckless words in a way that destroy relationship. I work with teenagers. I worked with them for 10 years, and I love teenagers. One thing I love about them is they are probably the dumbest people relationally that I've ever met. They're trying to date, and it's just like literally having an infant driving a vehicle. It's just bad. Trying to do the friendship thing, trying to navigate all of those different dynamics that they're learning for the first time. And I can't think of any better advice for relationship management and procurement to take care of your relationships and to get new ones than this: watch your mouth. In fact, the Bible has a lot to say about your mouth. The book of Proverbs in particular, besides wisdom itself, talks mostly about your words. And so I'm just going to read some assorted Proverbs around this idea before we get into the rest. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 18. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. Verse 19. Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. Verse 31. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, but a perverse tongue will be silenced. Verse 32, the lips of the righteous know what finds favor, but the mouth of the wicked only what is perverse. Now jump down to chapter 12, verse 13. Evildoers are trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent escape trouble. From the fruit of their lips, people are filled with good things, and the work of their hands brings them reward. Verse 17, an honest witness tells the truth, but a false witness tells lies. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Now jump with me to chapter 15, verse 1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Verse 4, the soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. 16:23, the hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent, and their lips promote instruction. 28, a perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. 17:28, even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. This is hysterical. You seem smart even if you're stupid, if you don't talk, and discerning if they hold their tongues. 18:13, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. 21, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Lastly, 24, verse 26, an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips. Isn't that beautiful? I love the subject of words, and not just because I have the gift of gab, which I do. My wife and I, it's kind of the stereotype is that the man is wanting to get home already after church, and the girl is, talking with all her friends. It's opposite for us. She's usually out by the door ready to roll, and I'm still in here chatting. I love words, and I would say that I am truly a lover of words. Words affect me in a real deep way. They affect me like music. I think of some of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Brennan Manning, all of these different people. I feel like what they do is they give meaning to the things that I'm feeling. They describe things that I don't know how to describe. In fact, I wonder if you would be able to think for yourself how much words have the power to affect you both in a positive and a negative way. Words can affect us like music can. In fact, I have just two brief examples. My favorite poet of all time is named Wendell Berry. Raise your hand if you know Wendell Berry. It's like Pastor Cindy and maybe literally nobody. Oh my God, okay, well, he's an incredible writer, an incredible poet. He's a farmer. He's just the most beautiful writer that I know. And I've got two poems. And when I read them, I just want you to be overcome with the language. Don't even worry as much about the subject, but just see how words have the power to affect you. Here we go, poem number 1. This is The Peace of Wild Things. When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. One more. This is What We Need Is Here. Geese appear high over us, pass, and the sky closes. Abandon as in love or sleep holds them to their way, clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here. And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye, clear. What we need is here. The words are powerful. And there will be a time where you are long gone, but the words that you speak will still be here, affecting people in ways that you don't even realize. Giving life that lasts longer than your life, and giving death that lives on even past your death. In fact, words can wound like nothing else. A verse that we read was chapter 12, verse 18. The words of the reckless pierce like swords. Once you say something, it can never be unsaid. Right? Once you say something, there will never be a universe where you didn't say what you said. It's like a sword. You can, if you stab someone, you can pull out the sword, but you can never pull out the wound. Right? And even when the wound heals, the scar will remain forever. And so words can wound, but even more than that, words can kill. I like to think of this, that we have 3 different kinds of lives. We have a physical life, and we also have a psychological life, and we have a communal life with each other. And words can destroy all 3. First off, a physical life. Did you know that words have the power to physically kill people? And you may be thinking, you're kind of exaggerating. Well, history tells us that I'm not. Did you know words have been the cause of war. Words have been the cause of murder. Words have been the cause of suicide. In fact, for me personally as a pastor, I have done funerals for teenagers that killed themselves because they could not reconcile the destructive force that is there because of careless words. And you might be thinking, that's a total overreaction. That's just an excuse. Well, that may be. But it does illustrate the incredible power of words to destroy as well as bring life. And so not just physical life, but also our psychological life. Words are how we form our identities. Right? If you go and you call a kid stupid continuously as he grows up, and he will deal with that his entire life. In fact, I bet even some of you in this room still right now have identity issues that stem from careless words from ignorant people. Because it has everything to do with how you see yourself. You guys know the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never. That is such a load of garbage, right? It should say something like, sticks and stones can just break bones, but words, they can kill your soul. And so it's not just your psychological life, it can also kill communal life. When you see a friendship disappear, when you see a marriage disintegrate. There are other reasons besides words, but barely. It's almost exclusively the destructive force behind relationships breaking is almost always words. In fact, if you guys are familiar with the psychologist John Gottman, back in the 90s, he did this from the University of Washington. He did this study that he called Love Lab, where he brought people into his lab that had been recently married, and he recorded them as they related to each other. They talked. And then 10 years passed, and they followed up with the couples to see which couples were still together and which weren't. Now, here's what was interesting, is that after watching the couples converse for 1 hour, they were able to predict with 95% accuracy whether or not that couple would still be married. 95%. After watching a couple talk to each other for just 1 hour. Relationships live and die on words. And it's not just the hearer of words, it's also the speaker of words. Did you know that your words can end up destroying not just the hearer, but also you too? One of the things that I think, one of the reasons is that words make our feelings real. They clothe our feelings. So for example, let's say you go to someone and you say, "I hate you." Well, that first time you said it because you felt it. But after that, you feel it because you said it. That once you say something, it puts it out there permanently. And so words can certainly bring death, words can kill, but words can also bring life. Proverbs 18:21, the tongue has the power of life and death. So we've talked about how it brings death, but it also brings life. How so? I like to think of it like food. The words for us are like food. They sustain us. Without words, we kind of like start to shrivel up and die. This is my main beef with existentialism. You guys know, are you guys familiar with that big word? It's a cool word that you can use to impress your friends at parties. Existentialism. This is a horrible oversimplification, but existentialism is essentially, I create myself, that meaning and purpose is found not outward, but inward. And to illustrate this, I would like to show you, who here has seen the movie Bridget Jones's Diary? People don't want to raise their hand for this. I forgive you. We're going to talk about lying later. Who here has read the book? 1, 2. Okay, a few of you. So essentially, it's just a cute kind of rom-com type movie, but the book is absolutely about existentialism. You're thinking, what? It's a modern take of existentialism. To illustrate this, I have in the book, one thing that Bridget Jones has is her New Year's resolutions. And I would like to share with you 3 of Bridget Jones's resolutions. Here we go. I will not waste money on books by unreadable literary authors to put impressively on shelves. 2, I will develop inner poise and authority and sense of self as a woman of substance, complete without boyfriend, as best way to obtain boyfriend. Number 3, be an assured, receptive, responsive woman of substance. My sense of self comes not from other people, but from myself? That can't be right. See, Bridget Jones, she's bought into the whole postmodern idea of existentialism, that you create yourself, that you don't need anything from the outside. All the validation you need comes from within yourself. Here's the truth. Are you ready? You can't. You can't validate yourself. It's like trying to proofread your own writing. You can't see your own errors because when you're the one making them, you can't see it. You need a word from the outside. So think about maybe perhaps you're an artist and you paint and you've been doing it for 5 years. And let's say every time you show anyone any of your artwork, they say, "This is probably the worst artwork I've seen in my entire life. An infant could make better paintings than this." Every single person says that. What would you do? Well, you say like, "Well, who cares what they think? All that matters is that I like." No, you'd quit. You're not an artist unless someone from the outside tells you that you're an artist. Right? And so the same is true that with everything in life, we need a word from the outside. And so that's why relationships then become so important, not just because they can wound us in such a profound way, but because they can heal us and give us a sense of identity. And so what we're going to talk about this morning is the character of words. So what are the contents of your words? And we've got 5 super fast points, and they're these: truthful speech rather than deceptive speech, gentle speech rather than harsh speech, timely speech rather than careless speech, direct speech rather than gossip, and economical speech rather than impulsive speech. And to help me with these points, I would actually like to welcome up my lovely wife. Can you just give an outrageous applause to Jordan Eiffert as she comes?
You have to share the table.
How much of our time did I take? All of it?
No.
Good.
I lost count. I wasn't doing my job accurately.
Yeah. Okay, so you all know my lovely wife, Jordan. Just a brief bio. We've been together for, this was a bad idea, 17 years. And we have been married for 11.
Almost
11. And she's brilliant. If you don't know, you're about to find out that Jordan is brilliant, and I asked her to come and help me with these points. So number 1 is this: truthful speech rather than deceptive speech. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 17 says this: an honest witness tells the truth, but a false witness tells lies. Truthful speech rather than deceptive speech.
I think that this idea is one that in our society today has become really hard to tell the difference between the two. Mm-hmm. Being able to tell the truth anymore from what is a lie or deceitfulness has gotten much harder.
Yeah.
And what makes me think of this is, think about fake news. You see it online all the time. You no longer know whether or not what you're reading is accurate or not. You question it. And then this for me is a big one. I always think about when you're watching the news or you're reading something and it says research says. Like, I can't even believe that anymore,
right.
Because 1 week research says that
Right.
milk will kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then like a week or 2 later, milk's the best thing for you.
Right.
Okay, well, which one is it?
Right.
And who do I believe? Mm-hmm. And so everything that we see, whether it's online or watching the news, it's gotten so much harder to tell between truth and lies.
Yeah.
It's gotten so much harder. We can take facts and twist them to say what we want them to say. Mm-hmm. We can easily do that. And that's easy to do by omitting one little piece of information. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's twisted into what you want it to say. And we do this all the time, whether we mean to or not. When we're in conversation with people, we omit a little something to make ourselves seem better. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you want to admit that about yourself or not, totally. You do it. We all do it because we don't want to look bad in front of someone. Being honest, being truthful is ridiculously hard. And to me, anymore, it's almost like we walk around in a haze. We're walking around in a haze trying to decipher between truth, what's real, what's truthful, and what's not. It's just not as easy as it used to be. And to me, it feels paralyzing. Like for me, I no longer want to watch the news, and I no longer want to read articles online because I can't, it's so difficult. Like it requires so much more research to learn truth and lies. And to me, that translates into our relationships. There's this lack of belief when we're having conversation with people because we don't know if they're telling us the truth. There's always this kind of question mark of whether or not you're telling me the truth. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to think, okay, so how can we decipher? How can we learn how to decipher the truth? And this is one thing that just, so simple, it came to my mind, is the word sincerity. When you're talking to someone, are you being sincere? Like I think about, there's a lot of times that we'll be walking through the hallway and how are you, good? We just kind of spout out whatever comes to mind. Well, have you ever been walking somewhere kind of quickly and someone stops and gives you a compliment and it catches you off guard? And there's just this something different. There's this sincere moment where you realize someone is really telling you the truth. They're telling you something that they believe is truthful about you, or vice versa. You see someone and you say something, and there's just this sincerity in you. To me, that's the piece that needs to be added back in our conversations. We need to be sincere with one another, because if you genuinely care for someone, you're not going to want to lie. You're not going to want to be deceitful, because you want them to know the truth. You want them to know that.
Beautiful. Yeah, one thing that I had thought of when we were talking about truthful speech versus deceptive speech, and don't you know that deceptive speech is not just lying? You know that, like, you can tell something technically true but still be deceptive. And so what's the big deal about being deceptive? Well, I think two problems with being deceptive. Number one is this: it destroys community. When you lie, you and the person you're lying to or being deceptive to, at this point, you begin to see different realities, right? You see the world this way, but because you lie, they see the world this way, and it creates a barrier because you no longer exist in the same world with the same rules. This is what happens with an unfaithful spouse. One of the reasons that it's so hurtful and so humiliating is because when you lie, you create a reality for yourself that's different than the one you're offering your spouse. Right? So that's why they feel so humiliated, because they thought the relationship was like this, but really the relationship was like this. So it destroys community. Number two is being deceptive just robs people of their ability to make decisions. We all make decisions based on what we know about the world. And the better people's information is, the better and the wiser decisions that they will make. However, the worse information that people have, the more destructive their decisions will be. So it destroys community and it robs the ability to make decisions. So you might be thinking, all right, tell the truth. And if people don't like it, well, just suck it up, you baby. Number two is this: gentle speech rather than harsh speech. Gentle speech rather than harsh speech. Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Beautiful.
Okay, so being truthful and being gentle can often seem contradictory, at least in my mind. They feel contradictory. Right. So we have to ask ourselves, what does gentleness mean? What does gentleness mean? What is it? When you think of being gentle, you think of someone soft-spoken and quiet. Maybe you think of Pastor Marshall.
Yeah. Hi.
I don't know if I felt that as a kid when I was getting in trouble, but he is very gentle. But that's not what gentleness is. Not from a biblical standpoint. Those things are true qualities of gentleness, but that's not from a biblical standpoint. Gentleness speaks the truth in a way people can receive it.
Yeah.
Gentleness is actually a strength. Gentleness is actually a strength. And so I was just really thinking through what are situations where I define myself speaking truth and being gentle. And it reminded me of high school, which was a long time ago, actually. And I had a friend, and we had been friends since we were in middle school. We'd been friends a long time. And then something changed. She started hanging out with different people. She started acting different, honestly, she started being really mean to me. And it got to a point where she started TPing our house and writing things about me that were unkind on the sidewalk. And so I knew who it was. I went to a small school. It wasn't hard to figure out. I knew who it was, and then I ended up getting her in trouble with her parents because obviously my parents weren't happy with what was going on, and so they're asking me, who's doing this? Well, my mom calls her mom, and so. Well, that didn't go over well, as you can imagine. But then we went away. I went to Hope, and we went away on these retreats. And she was still acting that way, still being mean. And it kind of stopped in the sense of it being so outright, but it was still happening. And I was grieved by the situation. This was a good friend of mine. And I felt, and I really believe that it was the Holy Spirit kind of pushing me towards something to talk to her. And that's scary and that's hard, but I did. I went to her. And I sat down with her, and I did it privately. I didn't do it in a way that all these friends saw it. And I was just honest with her. And I just told her, I said, I don't believe this is who you are. I think that this is you acting a certain way that's just not really who you are deep down inside. And I remember saying to her, I miss my friend. It's not like I had to call her out on every bad thing she had done, but I did need her to know that, like, I missed who she was. And truth had to be spoken in that situation. And it didn't go well right in that moment. She was still angry. She was still mad at me. But I knew I had done what I needed to do. And I think it might have been even years later, but she came to me and she said that conversation was a turning point. That conversation was a moment where I had to start making different choices. And in the end, it helped lead me back to God.
Right.
And so you may not see the results right away, but I had so many decisions to make in that situation. I could have been just as mean to her as she was to me. I could have yelled and screamed and done all those things, but the right thing for me to do, the godly thing for me to do, was to have just this conversation that brought out truth for her and for me. And so when we choose gentleness, when we choose to be gentle over being harsh, we're actually choosing to be selfless. Because we may not get to say the things that we really want to say. There may be some harsh things that we really want to say, but instead you put that behind to say the God things. And so as I was kind of going through my notes, I'd found this, and it's just something for you to think about. Gentleness is treating all men with perfect courtesy, that we can rebuke without ill will or bitterness, that we can argue without intolerance, that we can face the truth without resentment, that we can be angry and not sin, that we can be gentle and not weak.
Beautiful.
That's what gentleness is. There's just this quality inside of us that we can be truthful, but we can also be gentle.
Yeah. I have so little to add because I have room to grow for me and for many of us. One thing that I had thought of when we were talking about this before was that I believe one of the ways that you can tell the difference between gentle speech and ungentle speech is that gentle speech is, or ungentle speech is motivated out of wanting to inflict pain. Right? And so that can never be the motivation behind what you say. Every married person in the room knows what that feels like. You've just got the most brilliant point, and you know it's going to sting, and you can't wait for your turn. Right? It's not gentle. Right? Gentleness, it's about motivation, right? It's not about just telling people what they want to hear all the time, but it's about being motivated by love. So if you're ever talking to someone and that person, the way that they feel is, look, I didn't want to hear that. That was something that I don't want to hear, but I could tell that it was painful for them to tell me, and I know that they love me. Then you're into gentleness, not motivated to hurt, but motivated to love. Okay, number 3 is this, timely speech as opposed to careless speech. Proverbs 10:32, the lips of the righteous know what finds favor. Jordan.
You know, a good thing, like even a true thing to say, said at the wrong time, can change a relationship.
Totally.
It really can. It can be something that needs to be said, but if you choose the wrong moment, it can alter a friendship. It can alter a relationship. And I've actually seen this happen. I've had this happen to me. I was in a situation with a group of friends, and there was a new person joining into the group. And we were getting to know her, and we were having conversation, and we were just all kind of having a great time. And in that moment, this other person said something in that moment that wounded me. It wounded me. It hurt. And it wasn't expected. Like, the moment that it happened, it was so unexpected. It was so out of the blue. But the statement she made was a statement that altered a friendship with another person. It changed the friendship between me and another person in the room. Yeah. And it was because it was wrongly timed. Right. The information she had to give was perfectly fine. Right. It wasn't rude. It wasn't untrue. It was none of those things. But the way it was chosen to be spoken and the moment, that moment, there were a whole bunch of people around. Yeah. A whole bunch of people around. And it felt like in the moment those words were meant to hurt me. No one else. They were meant to hurt me. And again, what she said, not rude, not unkind, none of that. But it changed my friendship, not only with her, but with another person in the room. And it was the timing. We could have had that conversation another time in a more private setting, and it would have been no issue. No issue at all. We could have talked through it. We could have probably saved a friendship and gained a friendship. But because of that moment, that wrong time, it was careless. It wasn't thinking about how it would affect other people in the room. And so we have to be really careful about not being careless with the timing of something. Because timing is just as important as what you say. Right. Because if people aren't ready to receive it, they're not going to know how to respond.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I think this is really something that we've had to learn as leaders. You know, as a pastor, I spend a lot of my time talking with people and trying to persuade people of, like, what is a sermon other than me trying to convince you of something? And so as weird as it sounds, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and so if you would allow me to offer a pro tip, and it's this: you can say the right thing at the wrong time, and it does nothing but wound. Right. For example, you think, my wife and I, we are fiercely pro-life. We are. And the life that we have chosen should demonstrate our commitment to offering children a home as opposed to aborting them. I'm as pro-life as you can get. With that said, I do not believe the right thing to do is to go to the abortion clinic with the megaphone and scream out that abortion is murder. Right? A lot of these women, they will report that later on in their life, they deal with unbelievable guilt for their entire life for having an abortion. So what a horrible thing that the Christians would come and scream at them that they're murderers during this time. It's not the right time, and it's not at the right level. Right? So even if that's how you see it, that it's murder, it's not the right time. And so by saying the right thing in your mind at the wrong time, all you do is wound people. And not just at the right time, I also think it has something to do with being at the right level. Right? So if I talk to my wife the same way I talk to my 2-year-old daughter, that wouldn't be a good thing.
That would not be a blessing.
Right, that would not be a blessing. And if I talk to my daughter the same way I talk to my wife, that wouldn't be a blessing either. Right? And so I learned to talk with people in an appropriate way and honor people like my wife, and I honor them as equals as opposed to talking down to them. You know, I love being the butt of my own joke. I don't know if you guys know that. I like to be funny, and I don't want to be a jerk. So the tip is, if you make fun of yourself, you can be funny, and you're not a jerk. And so that's me. I love making my point and making me look like a big old horse's booty. I just love that. But here's one thing that I've learned. While it's fine for me to make myself the butt of the joke, my wife and I as a couple, we're the butt of my joke never. Right? Because that's not a blessing to my wife. And so do I just say, oh, you stop being so sensitive, it's blah, blah, blah. No, I talk to her eye to eye. Right? So I speak to her with respect at that right level. So that's it. Number 3, timely speech versus careless speech. Number 4, are you guys doing okay? Yes. Okay, number 4 is this direct speech versus gossip. Proverbs 10:18 says this: whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. Jordan.
This one's the hardest. Honestly, this is the most common thing, I think, if we're honest with ourselves, every single one of us deals with in this room, is gossip. It's notoriously known as a woman's thing. It's not just the girls. The guys do it too. It just may not look the same. And so to me, I just think, honestly, to me, this is the hardest one. We can learn those other ones. We can grab hold of the other ones. This one is hard. It's so much easier to talk about someone rather than talking to them.
Totally. Yeah.
It is such a big difference. And I think one of our hindrances is we justify our gossip. We justify our gossip. We say things like, I'm just trying to process the situation.
Right.
Or, I just need some advice on this. Or, I don't want to say anything mean, but. We say these things all the time. Honestly, we say them without even thinking.
Yeah.
We say them all the time. And honestly, these things may be true. Like, there are situations that you need to process through. I have to come to David sometimes and process through a situation. But what makes that different is, do I spend more time talking about the person instead of the solution?
Yeah, oh, it's good.
Do I sit there and just talk poorly about whatever happened to me by someone else? Do I spend so much time talking about the other person that we never talk about a solution?
Right.
Like, if you're genuinely coming to someone and saying, I need your advice, you should say what happened, move on, let's get to a solution. Yeah. But that's not what we do. Right. We carry the conversation about talking, just honestly, about the other person. We just do. That's how we... I don't know. I think it's just maybe the way the world works. I don't know why we do that, but we are all so guilty of that. We really are. And I think a lot of it just boiled down to this idea that it is easier to talk about someone, or it's easier to talk about something. That's what's easier, and what's hard is to go directly to a person. And we mention this a lot, but it's because it's the world we live in. Social media has made this 100 times worse.
Totally.
It's made it, more than that, 1,000 times worse. And I see it. Okay, I have a royal blog. I'm a geek, and I'm okay with it. But what that means for me is that I spend time on Twitter following royal reporters and other royal people who have blogs, and I love this little world. It's my own little small world that I've created, and I love it. But you know what I see? Gossip and hatred. I see it all the time. People say awful things about each other on Twitter. Fellow royal bloggers say stuff about another blogger. Yeah. They don't know who this person is, but they'll say it. They say awful things about the royal family, just like we do about celebrities. And they talk about them like they're not real people, but they're real people on the other end who have feelings. But because we're sitting behind a computer and we're not actually verbally saying the words, we don't see that as gossip. We don't see that as harmful, but it's harmful. It may be more harmful to you than it is to them, but there's a person on the other end of whatever you wrote receiving what you wrote, and it hurts. And social media has made that so much easier for us. And so we spend more time gossiping, not just with our words, but with our fingers. And so it's in our world all the time. And so what's the solution to that? What's the reality to that? It is as simple as you have to learn how to go talk to the other person. It's that simple. But here's the thing. Our minds are extremely powerful. And so the more time that you spend dwelling on it, talking about it, the mind is extremely powerful. You create a different person in your mind than the person you're going to go talk to. You've created an enemy way worse than just the person that exists. You've created an enemy in your mind. But when you choose to sit down and talk to that person, they're a real person with skin, with feelings. And I promise you, if you do that, you can resolve the issue like that. Because they're a person just like you. And more than likely, it's a mistake that was made. And you're able to have that conversation. You're able to get that out there. You're able to apologize. You're able to move past that moment when you choose to sit in front of someone face to face and say the hard thing. And you can do that being truthful and gentle. All of those things, you can see how that all comes across. But we have to learn how to be direct and stop talking so much behind the scenes, because it's really harmful. It's really harmful.
So good. Just one quick story, illustration. It's not often that people come to me to complain about other pastors here on staff. I just want to clarify and say that does not happen often, but it has happened. where people have some sort of grievance against Pastor Marshall or Pastor Shirley, and they come to me, and I'm just listening to them talk about it, and I'm just thinking in my head while they're talking, like, okay, how many people have you told this to? Like, how many times have you told this story? And then after they finish their 7-point dissertation, I'll ask, okay, well, have you talked to them about, well, no. And it's like, okay, well, then in what world is you telling me going to produce anything positive, right? Gossip is the way of the coward. It is. Gossip is the way of the coward. Because you want to assert your will, but you're too afraid to do it to somebody in an honorable way. So instead, you go behind their back. It takes courage to say what you really mean to somebody. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it feels like you're being nitpicky, but to actually go to someone and express something about them or about your relationship instead of just telling your best friend, it takes courage, but it's worth doing.
I just want to add to gossip is that piece to me that it destroys a community faster than anything because it spreads. And in this series where we're talking about relationships, that's why this one is so important because we can destroy what God is trying to build by just continually talking poorly about people instead of doing the right thing, which is going to them.
Beautiful. Good. Okay, lastly, economical speech versus impulsive speech. Proverbs 10:19, sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. I actually like the way the New American Standard puts it. It says it like this: when there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. I think it's hysterical. When there's a lot of words, someone is going to mess up. But he who restrains his lips is wise.
This one immediately made me think of our 2-year-old.
Yes.
She's a talker. She talks a lot.
Yeah.
She talks all the time. She never stops. And I would think my mom would say that's payback because that's how I was. But she talks all the time. And the way she talks is this: I want, and then she'll just spout off a whole bunch of things. She'll say, I want a bar. I want yogi, which is yogurt. I want cheese. I want the potch, which is the park. I want outside. I want shoes on. I want, she'll just, every word that she knows is going to come out in one sentence.
Right, yeah.
And as her parent, I have to decipher what it is that she actually wants, which most of the time she has no idea what that actually is. But then I have to start working my way through that. Now, for Grace, she is learning. That's perfectly acceptable. I'm not going to scold her for telling me every word she knows. I'm actually very proud of her that she has all these words. But if she's acting like that when she's 15, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. Because as adults, we're not supposed to say every thought that we have out loud. Right. We're really not. And I think sometimes we just talk to fill space. Maybe there's an awkward silence. We start talking. Maybe we're uncomfortable with what's going on in our own brain. So we start talking. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble. Our words matter. We have to use them well. So we really do have to learn how to be more thoughtful with our words. We have to choose them better. We have to choose them wisely. I would say this: avoid talking just to say something. If it's a little awkward, it's all right. Because it would be better for it to be a little awkward for a minute than to say something you don't mean or something you wish you hadn't said. It's a lot better.
So true. So good. Yeah, and I think this point about economical speech and what we mean by that is maybe a little bit less speech as opposed to just filling the universe with meaningless words. It's particularly offensive to me because I am a preacher. So, the average person, when they're talking, they speak about 120 words per minute. So that's 2 words a second. I'm probably double that. Especially when I get going. And then if you think, I listen to myself probably a couple hours a day talking to people, it just boggles the mind how many words come out of the mouth of David Eiffert every single day. But the truth is that if you just go spouting off to anybody, you are going to wound. And so part of I think maturing and finding our way as an apprentice of Jesus is to model the speech that we see in the life of Jesus. And so I hope those are helpful. Truthful, gentle, timely, direct, economical. And so you might be thinking, well, what's the solution then? Do we just grit our teeth and not say the things that we really want to say? No, in fact, we read the solution in Proverbs 16 at the very beginning. When Solomon said this, the hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent. What a verse. The hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent. So their mouth is prudent. And what makes their mouths prudent? Their heart, right? So you can see that when God comes and changes us, he doesn't change us from the outside in. He changes us from the inside out. And it's amazing if you were to go home today and read the book of Acts chapter 2, you would read about an event that we call Pentecost. Right? Pentecost, this is not exactly right, but in essence, it's when the Holy Spirit shows up on the scene. And when the Holy Spirit shows up on the scene and fills these people, they become filled with the Spirit, what's the first thing that changes? Their language, right? To where now all of a sudden, because there's this inner transformation, now all of a sudden they're able to speak in a way that they understand each other. Even if it's not people who speak the same language, there was this given this supernatural gift to speak in a way that could be understood by the hearer. And so in that sense, it's really interesting that Pentecost is the reverse of the curse of Babel. You guys are familiar with Genesis chapter 11, where these people, they had wickedness in their heart. And so what happened? Then their speech got destroyed, right? They were unable to hear each other. And so the Spirit comes and he reverses that. Where people before, they couldn't understand each other because they spoke many languages. The Holy Spirit would come, and through the inner transformation that comes, we're able to speak in a way that the hearer can understand us. Which, of course, brings us to Jesus. You know, I think if you want to see the model for appropriate speech, you just have to look at Jesus. Study his life, study his words. Not one extra word, not one. I mean, talk about truthful, gentle, timely, direct, economical. Jesus was the master of all of that. And in fact, John would come and say, not just about the words of Jesus, but when describing Jesus, he would say that Jesus is the Word of God. And only Jesus has the ability to change our hearts at the deepest level.